Every moment of our lives is governed by rhythm. Poetry takes its cue instinctively and vitally from this dance of life. The alternating contractions of the four chambers of the heart, creating the unmistakable lub-dub sounds. The seasons, even the tides and the waves. Hearing a poem's rhythm becomes a way of regulating our own heartbeat. The poetry anthology that I was involved in editing, Stressed, Unstressed, Classic Poems to Ease the Mind, had its origin at a dark moment in my life and that of my wife, Paula Byrne. Our 5-year-old child suddenly lost her kidneys and very nearly died. She came through and had a transplant and is doing remarkably well many years later. But in that darkest moment when she was struggling to survive, it was very hard to think of anything other than the prospect of losing her. We waited in the hospital, and there was nothing to read but a tatty celebrity magazine. And it was after that, when things began to get better, we thought, what about putting together an anthology of poems to help people through dark times? Perhaps the mindful reading of a poem can help restore the balance of the nervous system. A sense of calm can follow. And gradually, as our breathing slows, the less stressed and anxious we feel.
Okay. That is a photoplethysmograph that sends a red light through your finger, and depending on how much of that red light is absorbed versus bounced back determines your heart rate. So I work with people suffering from various psychophysiological disorders like anxiety, depression, chronic pain, and I also work with people who are quite good at what they do and would like to improve their professional performance. So athletes, executives, lawyers, physicians, people like that. So I'm gonna have you just sit normally, breathing normally for a minute, and then we can have you read a poem and see what happens to your heart rate variability then.
Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. You will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up. But I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. And miles to go before I sleep.
Yeah, this looks great.
Okay.
This is really nicely synchronized. So you're breathing in, your heart rate goes up. You're breathing out, the heart rate goes down. Very, very nicely synchronized. Okay. Now let's see what happens if you read that just to yourself silently. So with biofeedback, we display physiological signals such as your heart rate and your breath and your muscle tension, perhaps brain waves and skin conductance and finger temperature. All the parameters that tell you about, what is going on in your body right now. And the person sees, those physiological signals on the computer screen, and they can learn, all right, if I move this way, or if I breathe in this way, or if I respond to this in that way, these are the kinds of changes that I can produce. The person learns how to modify physiological and therefore emotional responses in order to produce a more helpful response in the moment. How's the breathing feeling? There's actually a couple of research studies that show that, when we recite a poem out loud,
You will not see me stopping here.
the rhythmicity of the poem helps regulate your breathing, and it can contribute to higher heart rate variability. The heart rate variability is the difference in time that passes from heartbeat to heartbeat. If you were to take your pulse, you can put your fingers on your wrist or on your neck, and you feel a thump, thump, thump. Each one of those thumps is a heartbeat. That's the left ventricle of your heart contracting, sending oxygenated blood out to the body. And if you were to just take your heart rate, if you were just to count the number of thumps, let's say in a minute, maybe you'll get 60 or 70 of those. That's your heart rate. And that's what we're used to measuring and thinking about. But in that minute, even though there are 60, 70 heartbeats, the time that passes from each heartbeat to the next is actually constantly varying. So some heartbeats are coming closer together, some are coming further apart. That means that your heart rate is constantly speeding up and slowing down, speeding up and slowing down. And that's heart rate variability. The greater the ability of your heart to beat with these different frequencies, to speed up as much as possible and slow down as much as possible, the healthier and more resilient you are. Right? And self-regulation is all about finding that optimal level of activation that you need. Poetry helps to self-regulate, and it helps settle your optimal state of activation where you need it to be. Then your heart is going to beat at the rate that's needed, and the force of ventricular contraction is going to be what it needs to be, and it will act as a beta blocker without having to take a pill. If we're looking at this screen here, you started reading the poem to yourself right about here. And so once you started reading the poem to yourself and your breathing became more rhythmic, your heart rate variability also increased. So that's really, really interesting. The effect on your autonomic nervous system was very clearly positive. We don't quite have enough research to say, yes, absolutely it works. But as an educated guess, knowing what happens when people read poetry, knowing what happens with heart rate variability, I would imagine that absolutely bringing poetry into our heart rate variability training, I think, is an excellent addition.
The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. And miles to go before I sleep.